Elena signed the divorce papers without a single tear. Her husband Marcus laughed in her face, his mistress already wearing the necklace he'd bought with Elena's hidden money. He threw her suitcase into the rain and slammed the door. What Marcus didn't know, what no one knew, was that the broke waitress he'd just discarded owned the building they stood in, the company he thought he built, and the bank that held every loan to his name. When the judge read her birth name 3 days later, Marcus Ashford didn't just lose his wife. He lost everything. If you want to see how one woman's patience became a billionaire's nightmare, subscribe now and stay until the end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain hammered against the penthouse windows on West 57th Street, like fists demanding entry. Elena Cross stood by the marble kitchen island, her hands steady despite everything. 5 years. 5 years of playing the devoted wife, the simple waitress who got lucky, the woman who ironed his shirts and smiled at his insults. Tonight it ended. Marcus Ashford adjusted his silk tie in the reflection of the microwave, not bothering to look at her. He checked his Rolex, a gift she'd saved 3 years to buy him, and sighed like a man inconvenienced by traffic. "Are we done with the crying yet, Elena?" She hadn't cried, not once. But he wasn't paying attention. He never had. "The movers will be here in 20 minutes. Marcus continued, his voice smooth as polished stone. "I want your boxes in the service elevator before Victoria arrives. She's allergic to clutter." Elena swallowed. "Clutter, Marcus. I've lived here for 5 years. This is my home." Was. He finally turned to face her. God, he was handsome. That sharp jawline, those piercing blue eyes that made investors write checks and women forget their common sense. Elena used to think those eyes held depth. Now she saw only mirrors reflecting his own image back at him. "It was your home when you were useful. When I needed a doting wife to play the part while I built Ashford Dynamics." He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she could smell his cologne, the one she'd picked out for their first anniversary. "But let's be honest, Elena. You don't fit the brand anymore." He looked her up and down like a man examining a car he'd decided to trade in. "You're plain, unambitious. You've let yourself go." She hadn't let herself go. She'd let herself disappear. There was a difference. Marcus tossed a thick manila envelope onto the marble. It landed with a heavy slap. "The prenup," he said. "Ironclad. You get what you came in with," which, if I recall correctly, was a pile of student debt and a beat-up Honda Civic. A smile played on his lips. "I've been generous, though. I paid off the Civic. Consider it a severance package." The front door clicked open. It wasn't the movers. The click of stilettos echoed through the penthouse like gunshots. Victoria Lane strutted in, shaking a wet umbrella onto the rug Elena had hand-woven during the lonely months when Marcus traveled. Victoria was everything Elena wasn't currently. Flashy, loud, draped in labels that screamed for attention. Her red trench coat cost more than Elena's annual grocery budget. Her blonde hair was perfect despite the storm. Her smile was the smile of a woman who'd already won. "Oh, good," Victoria said, looking at Elena the way one looks at a stain on white carpet. "She's still here." She walked straight to Marcus and kissed him. Not a quick peck. A deep, possessive kiss right in front of Elena. Marcus didn't pull away. He leaned into it, his hand sliding to Victoria's waist. Elena watched. She didn't look away. She didn't flinch. Victoria broke the kiss and smirked. "Did you tell her about the gala, baby?" "Not yet." Marcus chuckled, wiping lipstick from his mouth. "Elena, next week is the Tech Innovators Gala. Victoria and I are being honored as the power couple of the year." He paused, savoring the moment. "It wouldn't do to have my ex-wife lurking around the apartment while the press is interviewing us. You understand, right? Strictly business." "Business," Elena repeated. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Look." Marcus stepped forward, looming over her. He was a full head taller, and he used every inch of that height now. You were a waitress when I found you. A nobody serving coffee in a diner that smelled like grease. I gave you 5 years of luxury. You didn't have to work. You didn't have to struggle. You lived off my hard work." He pointed at the envelope. "Now the ride is over. Sign the papers. Take your clothes. Get out." His voice dropped cold and sharp. "And if you fight this, Elena, I will bury you in legal fees until you're begging for change on the subway. I know people, powerful people. You know nothing. You have nothing. You are nothing." Elena stared at him. For a long moment, something flickered in her brown eyes. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. It looked almost like pity. She reached out, picked up the pen lying next to the papers, and signed her name. Elena Cross. Marcus blinked. He'd expected begging. He'd expected tears. He'd expected the scene he'd been rehearsing comebacks for all week. "Smart girl," he sneered, recovering quickly. "At least you know when you're beaten." "I'm not beaten, Marcus." Her voice was quiet, calm, like the eye of a hurricane. She walked to the hallway, where a single modest suitcase waited. She hadn't packed the jewelry he'd bought her. She hadn't packed the designer dresses he'd forced her to wear to his events. Just her old jeans, her books, and a small locked metal box she'd kept hidden under the bed for 5 years. She opened the front door. The wind howled from the hallway vent, carrying the distant rumble of thunder. "One last thing," Elena said. She didn't look back. "Make sure you read the lease agreement for this penthouse very carefully before you host that gala." Marcus laughed, a loud barking sound that bounced off the expensive walls. "The lease I own this penthouse, you delusional woman. I bought it 3 years ago." "Did you?" 2 words, soft as a whisper, sharp as a blade. She stepped out. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. Victoria wandered into the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine from the bottle Elena had been saving for her anniversary. "What a psycho," she laughed. "Talking about leases. She's probably having a breakdown." Marcus shrugged, picking up the signed divorce papers. "Who cares, she's gone. And she didn't cost me a dime." He walked to the window and watched a small figure in a thin raincoat exit the building and disappear into the dark, wet streets of Manhattan. He felt like a king. He had the money, the fame, the beautiful mistress, and he'd just shed the dead weight of his boring wife without paying a cent in alimony. He had no idea he'd just signed his own death warrant. Elena didn't go to a shelter. She didn't call a friend to crash on their couch. She walked 3 blocks through the pouring rainwater soaking through her thin coat until she was shivering. She stopped at a nondescript black sedan parked in a loading zone on 6th Avenue. She tapped on the rear window. The glass rolled down smoothly, silently, the way only very expensive cars can manage. Inside sat an older man with silver hair, impeccably dressed in a charcoal 3-piece suit. Gold cufflinks caught the streetlight. His eyes, sharp and gray, took in her wet hair, her cheap suitcase, her trembling shoulders. His jaw tightened. Not with disappointment, with barely suppressed rage. "Get in, Miss Elena." She tossed her suitcase into the front seat and slid into the back. The leather was warm. The climate control was perfect. The noise of the city vanished the moment the door closed, replaced by the soft hum of an engine that cost more than most people's houses. "You look terrible," the man said, handing her a towel. "It was woven with gold thread." "Hello to you too, William." Elena dried her face. She took a deep breath. The smell of cheap cleaning products from the penthouse finally faded, replaced by old leather and expensive cologne, and something else. Something that smelled like home. Did he sign? William Prescott wasn't just a driver. He was the senior managing partner of Prescott Sterling and Associates, one of the most feared law firms on 2 continents. He'd handled mergers that moved markets. He'd defended royalty. He'd crushed opposing counsel so thoroughly that some of them had changed careers entirely. He was also her godfather. He signed, Elena said, leaning her head back against the seat and closing her eyes. He thinks he won. He thinks I'm homeless right now, crying in some shelter, wondering where my next meal is coming from. The arrogance of the man. William signaled the driver to pull away. To think he could buy the Pinnacle penthouse without running a background check on the holding company. He really believes he owns it. He wired $12 million to an offshore LLC called Chimera Holdings, Elena said. A small, tired smile played on her lips. He never asked who owned Chimera. He just wanted the address. He's obsessed with status symbols. The right building, the right floor, the right view. And he has no idea. None. Elena opened her eyes. They were different now. Harder. Clearer. The soft, submissive wife was fading with every block they drove. I played the part perfectly, William. The orphan waitress. The girl with no connections, no family, no money. I cooked his meals. I ironed his shirts. I let him explain economics to me at dinner parties while I smiled and nodded. She looked out the window. Rain streaked the glass like tears. I was managing a portfolio 10 times the size of his entire company, she said quietly. And he thought I couldn't understand the stock market. William poured her sparkling water from a crystal decanter in the car's console. Why did you stay so long? We could have crushed him 2 years ago when he started the affair with that Instagram model. Elena was quiet for a moment. Because I wanted to be sure, she finally said. I wanted to believe that somewhere deep down he loved me. For me. Not for the name. Not for the Harrington legacy. Not for the money or the connections or the power. She took a sip of the water. Her hand was steady now. I wanted to see if a man could love Elena Cross. The nobody. She turned to face William. I have my answer now. He didn't love me. He loved having a servant he could show off. He loved having someone to make him feel superior. He loved the idea of rescuing a poor waitress and turning her into a trophy. Her voice dropped. He never saw me at all. William's expression softened for just a moment. He'd known Elena since she was born. He'd watched her grow up in the halls of the Harrington estate. He'd taught her to play chess when she was 7, and by the time she was 12, she was beating him. She was the smartest person he knew, and Marcus Ashford had treated her like furniture. Where to? William asked. The estate in the Hamptons, the townhouse on the Upper East Side. Your father is in Geneva, but I can have the jet ready within the hour. Neither. Elena reached into her coat and pulled out the small metal box she'd taken from the apartment. She opened it carefully. Inside lay a single heavy signet ring, gold old worn smooth by generations. The crest showed a black hawk holding a golden key. She slipped it onto her finger. Take me to the Pierre Hotel, she said. I need to set up a war room. A war room. The court date is in 3 days. Marcus bribed a clerk to fast-track the divorce. He wants to be officially single before the gala. Elena's smile was cold. He's going to get his wish. William studied her face. What are you planning? First, freeze the assets of Chimera Holdings, specifically the property management division. If Marcus wants to host a gala in my apartment, he's going to find the locks changed. The deed is in your name technically, William said slowly, but he believes he holds the title. When do you want to drop the hammer? Not yet. Elena's mind was working, calculating the way it always did when she let herself think clearly. Let him have his moment. Let him invite the press. Let him invite the investors. Let him stand in front of cameras and talk about how successful he is. She turned to look out the window. The lights of Manhattan blurred past. I want the world watching when the ground falls out from under him. William nodded slowly. And the divorce hearing. We're going to let him present his case. We're going to let him slander me. We're going to let him tell the judge that I'm a leech who deserves nothing. Elena paused. And then we're going to introduce him to my father." William raised an eyebrow. "Your father hasn't set foot in a New York courtroom in 20 years. He will for this." There was something in Elena's voice now. Something that hadn't been there during the 5 years of her marriage. Something that had been sleeping, waiting, biding its time. "Marcus Ashford didn't just break my heart, William. He insulted the family." She held up the ring, letting the streetlights catch the ancient crest. "And you know the family motto?" William nodded slowly. His smile was the smile of a shark who'd just spotted blood in the water. "Nemo me impune lacessit." No one attacks me with impunity. The car glided through the rain, carrying the secret heiress to the Harrington Maritime Consortium, a fortune so old and vast, it made Marcus Ashford's tech startup look like a child's lemonade stand toward her revenge. Back at the penthouse, Marcus was pouring champagne. He handed a glass to Victoria and raised his own in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, grinning, "and to getting rid of dead weight." Victoria clinked her glass against his. "She really thought she could guilt-trip you into giving her money. Pathetic. She's probably sleeping on a park bench right now." Marcus laughed and took a long drink. 5 years of marriage, and she walks away with nothing but a paid-off Honda Civic. I'm a genius. He looked around the penthouse, his view, his life. He didn't notice the brand on the champagne bottle. He didn't know that the vineyard was owned by the Harrington family. He didn't know that the building he was standing in was owned by the Harrington family. He didn't know that the bank holding the loans for his company was partially owned by the Harrington family. He didn't know anything at all. And in 3 days, he was going to learn exactly how much that ignorance would cost him. The next morning, Marcus Ashford woke up feeling like a king. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Too much sunlight. He squinted, groaning, and reached for the bedside tablet that controlled the penthouse's smart home system, a prototype of the technology his company was selling to investors. He tapped the icon to lower the blackout shades. "Access denied. Contact administrator." Marcus frowned. He tapped again, harder. "Access denied." He tried the thermostat. The penthouse was cold, 60 degrees, maybe less. His breath was almost visible. "Access denied. Contact administrator." "Victoria!" he shouted. "Did you mess with the control panel?" Victoria groaned from under the duvet. "I didn't touch anything. It's freezing in here, Marcus. Fix it. I have a facial at 10 and I can't show up looking puffy." Marcus threw off the covers and marched to the main interface panel in the kitchen. The screen was flashing a red warning icon he'd never seen before. A black hawk holding a golden key. What the hell is that? He tried to override the system using his developer code. The screen blinked once. Unauthorized user. His phone buzzed. A text from his CFO, Greg. "Emergency. Call me now." Marcus dialed, his jaw tight. "What?" "We have a problem with the gala venue," Greg said. He sounded like a man who hadn't slept. "The deposits bounced." Marcus went still. "Bounced. We have $40 million in the operating account." "We did. This morning at 9 a.m. the bank flagged our accounts for a compliance audit. They've frozen all outgoing transfers for 48 hours. 48 hours, the gala is in 3 days. Who authorized an audit?" "It wasn't internal," Greg said carefully. "It was triggered by an external complaint. A priority flag from a major shareholder." "I am the major shareholder." "Not the only one." Greg paused. "Remember the silent partner block, the 15% we never identified, the angel investment from the blind trust in Switzerland." Marcus remembered. 5 years ago, when he was desperate for seed funding, a mysterious investor had offered him $12 million with almost no strings attached. He'd been so eager to take the money that he hadn't asked questions. "They've never voted," Marcus said slowly. "They've never contacted us. Why now?" "They filed a complaint this morning. Cited mismanagement of funds. Demanded an immediate freeze pending investigation." Marcus gripped the edge of the counter. First the house, now the company. It felt coordinated, but that was impossible. Elena was the only person with a motive, and she was currently, he assumed, crying in a women's shelter somewhere, wondering how she'd afford her next meal. She couldn't orchestrate a bank audit. She barely understood how credit cards worked. "Right, fix it," Marcus hissed. "I don't care how. Use the offshore reserves if you have to. I cannot walk into court tomorrow looking broke." He hung up and stared at the locked control panel. The hawk seemed to be watching him, mocking him. He shook off the feeling. It was a coincidence, a glitch, a minor setback. He was Marcus Ashford. He was a winner. This was just a bump in the road. He didn't know that the road was about to collapse entirely, and when he walked into that courtroom tomorrow, he would finally meet the woman he'd actually married. The morning of the divorce hearing arrived with a cold gray sky that matched the ice in Marcus Ashford's veins. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror at the Midtown Hotel where he'd been forced to spend the night. The penthouse was still locked. The smart system still flashing that damned hawk icon. He'd called every tech support line he could find, threatened 3 different building managers, and gotten nowhere. But none of that mattered now. Today, he would finish Elena Cross once and for all. Marcus adjusted his tie, a navy silk that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He practiced his smile in the mirror. Confident, charming, the smile of a man who always won. His phone buzzed. Arthur Pendergast, his lawyer. "Tell me you have good news," Marcus said. "She still hasn't retained counsel," Arthur replied. "No lawyer of record, just a public defender notification that was never confirmed. She's going to represent herself." Marcus laughed. "She's going to stand in front of a judge and argue her own case. This is going to be a slaughter." 20 minutes in and out, Arthur agreed. "The prenup is ironclad. She signed it without reading it, remember. She gets nothing." "Nothing," Marcus repeated, savoring the word. "Make sure the press knows. I want this story buried before the gala." He hung up and checked his reflection one more time. Victory looked good on him. The New York Civil Courthouse smelled like floor wax and broken dreams. Marcus strode down the hallway, flanked by Arthur and 2 junior associates carrying stacks of files they probably wouldn't need. Victoria walked beside him, wearing a white dress that made her look innocent. The diamond on her finger caught the fluorescent light. "Remember," Arthur whispered as they approached courtroom 4B. "She's going to play the victim. Don't engage. Let me destroy her credibility. We're going for total dismissal of spousal support based on the infidelity clause." "But she didn't cheat," Marcus said. Arthur winked. "Prove she didn't." They pushed through the heavy oak doors. The courtroom was small, sparse, unremarkable. A bored bailiff stood against the wall. The judge's bench was empty. At the defendant's table, sitting entirely alone, was Elena. Marcus stopped walking. He'd expected her to look wrecked. Red eyes, messy hair, maybe still wearing the clothes she'd left in. Instead, Elena looked like a different person. She wore a black suit so perfectly tailored it seemed painted on. Simple, unbranded, but the fabric absorbed light in a way that whispered old money. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe chignon that highlighted cheekbones Marcus had somehow never noticed before. She sat with her back perfectly straight, hands folded on the table. No papers, no water bottle, no nervous fidgeting. Just stillness. "She cleaned up well," Victoria whispered cattily. "Probably spent her last dime on a rental suit." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not fear, not yet, just uncertainty. "Where's her lawyer?" he asked. "She doesn't have one." Arthur chuckled, settling into the plaintiff's chair. "Look at the table. Empty. She's going pro se. This is going to be easier than taking candy from a baby." "All rise." The bailiff's voice echoed through the room. Judge Harold Miller swept in black robes, billowing. He was known as the hanging judge in divorce cases. Efficient. Impatient. And he had a documented soft spot for self-made entrepreneurs. Marcus had specifically maneuvered to get him assigned. Case number 4922, Ashford versus Ashford. Judge Miller announced, settling into his chair. Appearances: Arthur Pendergast for the plaintiff Marcus Ashford. Arthur's voice boomed with confidence. Judge Miller looked at Elena. And for the defendant. Elena rose slowly. Her movements were deliberate, unhurried, like someone who had all the time in the world. Representation for the defendant is en route, Your Honor. He requests a 5-minute recess. En route. Judge Miller scowled over his reading glasses. This court runs on schedule, Mrs. Ashford. If your public defender is stuck in traffic, that's not my concern. We proceed. Very well. Elena sat back down. She didn't look panicked. She didn't look worried. She looked like someone watching a movie she'd already seen. Arthur wasted no time. He launched from his chair like a man who charged $800 an hour and intended to earn every penny. Your Honor, we are here to dissolve a marriage built on deception. While Mr. Ashford worked 18-hour days building a technology empire that employs hundreds of New Yorkers, the defendant contributed nothing. No financial assets, no emotional support, no household management. He paused for effect. In fact, we have evidence suggesting she was siphoning household funds for personal use. Elena didn't flinch. She just watched Arthur pace, her expression unreadable. Furthermore, Arthur continued warming to his performance. Mr. Ashford is a man of significant public standing. The defendant's refusal to sign the initial separation agreement was a clear attempt at extortion. She wants a payout she didn't earn. He turned to the judge with practiced sincerity. We're asking for strict enforcement of the prenuptial agreement. She leaves with what she brought in. He let the words hang, which was nothing. Judge Miller scribbled notes. Mrs. Ashford, do you have a response? Elena stood. I do, Your Honor, but I'd prefer my counsel to deliver it. I told you, Judge Miller snapped. We are not waiting for... The courtroom doors exploded open. Not pushed, not opened. Exploded. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Every head turned. 3 men walked down the center aisle. The first was older, silver-haired, wearing a 3-piece suit that cost more than Marcus's car. He carried a leather briefcase with gold clasps. His stride was the stride of a man who had never been told no in his life. Flanking him were 2 younger attorneys, both struggling under towers of files. Arthur Pendergast went pale. His legal pad slipped from his fingers and hit the floor. Apologies for the delay, Your Honor. The silver-haired man's voice was smooth British and absolutely commanding. He didn't sound sorry at all. Security downstairs had some difficulty clearing the sheer volume of evidence we've brought. Judge Miller sat up straighter in his chair. His demeanor changed completely. Mr. Prescott. Marcus leaned toward Arthur. Who is that? Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. That's William Prescott, senior partner at Prescott Sterling and Associates. Never heard of them. They don't advertise. Arthur swallowed hard. They handle mergers that move entire economies. They represent European royalty. They've never lost a case in 40 years. He turned to Marcus with genuine fear in his eyes. Why the hell is he here for a divorce case? William Prescott reached the defense table. He didn't acknowledge Marcus's existence. He placed his briefcase on the table and opened it with a soft click. I wasn't aware you took domestic cases, Judge Miller said carefully. I don't. William pulled out a single document bound in blue velvet. I only take cases involving the protection of key assets for the Harrington Consortium. The name hit the room like a physical force. Marcus saw Arthur flinch, saw Judge Miller's eyebrows climb toward his hairline, saw the junior associates exchange panicked glances. I'm sorry, Marcus said loudly, standing up. Can someone explain what's happening? This is a simple divorce case. My wife was a waitress. She has no assets. She has no connections. What the hell is the Harrington Consortium? William Prescott turned slowly. For the first time, he looked directly at Marcus Ashford. His eyes were gray, cold, the eyes of a predator who had already calculated exactly how his prey would die. "The Harrington Consortium," William said softly, "owns the third largest shipping fleet in the world. They have held that position for 157 years. Their combined assets exceed $43 billion. He paused. "And the woman you are currently trying to leave penniless is the sole heir to the entire fortune." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus heard his own heartbeat, heard the buzz of the fluorescent lights, heard Victoria's sharp intake of breath behind him. "That's impossible," he heard himself say. "Elena was a waitress. I met her at a diner in Queens. She could barely afford her rent." "She could afford to buy the diner," William replied, "and the building it occupied, and the entire block surrounding it. She simply chose not to." "Your Honor?" Arthur sputtered, finding his voice. "This is absurd. We've conducted background checks. Mrs. Ashford has no significant assets, no inheritance, no—" "You checked Elena Cross." William's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. "A carefully constructed identity with carefully constructed limitations." He turned to Elena. "Would you care to introduce yourself properly, Miss Harrington?" Elena rose. Something had changed. The woman who stood now wasn't the quiet wife Marcus had dismissed for 5 years. Her posture was different. Her presence was different. She seemed taller somehow, though she hadn't grown an inch. "My legal name is Elena Victoria Harrington," she said clearly. "Daughter of Theodore Harrington, sole heir to Harrington Maritime. And as of this morning—" She looked at Marcus. Her eyes held no anger, no satisfaction, just the cold, clear focus of a woman who had been waiting for this moment for half a decade. "The legal owner of everything you think you built." Marcus's legs gave out. He grabbed the table to keep from falling. "That's not possible," he whispered. "The company is mine. I wrote the code. I built the platform. You built it with her money." William opened the blue velvet document and spread it across the table. 5 years ago, you sought venture capital for Ashford Dynamics. You were rejected by every major firm in New York. Your credit was questionable. Your business plan was derivative. No one wanted to touch you. Each word was a hammer blow. Then you received an offer from Chimera Holdings, $12 million in seed funding. You were so desperate, so eager that you signed without investigating who was behind the offer. William pointed to a clause buried deep in the paperwork. Page 42, Section 7, the acceleration clause. In the event of divorce, criminal investigation, or public scandal, the lender reserves the right to demand immediate repayment of all principal plus accrued interest within 24 hours. Marcus's mouth was dry. "How much?" "With interest and penalties." William smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. $55 million, due tomorrow morning." "I don't have 55 million liquid." Marcus's voice cracked. "The money is tied up in company stock." "Correction." William pulled another document from the pile. "The money was tied up in company stock. However, since you are now in default, Chimera Holdings has exercised its right to seize collateral." "What collateral?" "The intellectual property." Elena spoke now. "The patent for the Ashford algorithm. You put it up as security for the original loan. You were so confident you'd never fail that you signed away rights to your own creation." She took a step forward. "I own the algorithm, Marcus. I own the code you think you wrote. And as of 8 a.m. this morning, I've issued a cease and desist order to Ashford Dynamics prohibiting use of my intellectual property." "You can't do that." Victoria's voice was shrill, desperate. "The gala is in 2 days. We're the power couple of the year." "There is no gala," Elena said quietly. "There is no power couple. There isn't even a company. Not anymore." Judge Miller cleared his throat. The sound was loud in the silent room. "Mr. Pendergast, unless your client can produce $55 million by tomorrow morning, I have no choice but to grant the motion for asset seizure. The penthouse, the accounts, and the intellectual property remain with Chimera Holdings." He looked at Elena with something that might have been respect. Furthermore, given these revelations regarding the defendant's actual financial standing, the plaintiff's request for a penniless divorce is denied with prejudice. He banged his gavel. Case dismissed. The sound echoed like a death knell. Marcus didn't move. Couldn't move. He watched Elena gather her things, watched William Prescott snap his briefcase shut, watched his entire life collapse in real time. Elena. His voice came out broken, desperate. Sarah, wait. Please. She paused at the partition between the tables. Up close, Marcus could see the details he'd missed for 5 years. The diamond studs in her ears were real vintage cuts worth more than his car. The ring on her pinky bore a crest he didn't recognize. The subtle confidence in her posture wasn't learned. It was bred. It was a test, wasn't it? He was grasping now, drowning. You wanted to see if I could make it on my own. Maybe I did make it. We can fix this. Combine our assets. Think of the power. There is no we, Marcus. Her voice was soft, final. There is only you, and the debt you owe me. But I love you. The lie tasted like ash. Victoria meant nothing. It was stress. I was weak. Take me back. Let's go home. Elena laughed. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't angry. It was the light, genuine laugh of a woman who had finally stopped pretending. Home, she asked. You threw me out of home 2 nights ago. You told me to leave before I cluttered up your life. You watched me walk into the rain and poured champagne to celebrate. She leaned close. Her perfume, jasmine and oud filled his senses. I'm not taking you back, Marcus. I'm taking everything else. She turned and walked toward the courtroom doors. Marcus scrambled after her, pushing past a stunned Arthur. He burst into the hallway, expecting to catch her at the elevators. Instead, he ran into a wall of cameras. The hallway was packed with reporters. Not courthouse regulars, the heavy hitters. Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Vanity Fair, Bloomberg. Someone had tipped them off. Mr. Ashford, is it true you've been evicted from your own company? Marcus, comment on the allegations that your wife funded your entire career. Are you facing bankruptcy? Marcus shielded his eyes against the flashing lights. Through the chaos, he saw Elena at the end of the hallway. She was stepping into a private elevator. William Prescott held the door. She didn't look back. The doors slid shut, severing her from his life completely. Victoria grabbed his arm, her nails digging through his jacket. Marcus, they're saying my cards are canceled. All of them. Fix this. Tell them who you are. Marcus looked at the cameras, looked at his sobbing mistress, looked at the wreckage of everything he'd built. For the first time in his life, he didn't have an answer. He didn't know who he was anymore. 48 hours later, the Tech Innovators Gala went forward as planned. But Marcus Ashford wasn't the guest of honor. He'd spent the past 2 days in a budget hotel in Queens, watching his life disintegrate from the glow of his phone screen. His accounts were frozen. His keycard to Ashford Dynamics had been deactivated. When he'd tried to enter his own building, security had escorted him out like a common trespasser. Victoria had lasted 6 hours after the court hearing. Once she realized the credit cards were dead and the penthouse was gone, she'd called him a loser and taken an Uber to her ex-boyfriend's loft in Brooklyn. But Marcus wasn't done. He still had one card left to play. The gala. His gala. The night he was supposed to receive the Visionary Award in front of 500 of the most powerful people in tech. If I can get on that stage, he told himself, adjusting his wrinkled tuxedo in the cracked bathroom mirror. If I can get the microphone, I can spin this. Make Elena the villain. The jealous ex-wife trying to destroy innovation. He took a taxi to the Plaza Hotel. He couldn't afford a limousine anymore. The scene outside was chaos. Luxury cars lined up 3 deep. Red carpet flooded with camera flashes. The elite of New York society ascending the stairs in designer gowns and bespoke suits. Marcus straightened his tie and walked toward the entrance. The event coordinator, a woman named Sarah, spotted him immediately. Her face cycled through surprise, discomfort, and something like pity. Marcus, We didn't think you were coming. Of course I'm coming. He forced his signature grin, though it felt like cracked plastic. I'm the guest of honor. Sarah bit her lip. There have been some changes to the program. The board met this morning. Changes? Just go inside. Marcus pushed through the doors. The grand ballroom was breathtaking. Chandeliers dripping with crystals. Tables set with gold leaf china. The cream of Manhattan society mingling in couture. But something was wrong. The massive screens behind the stage should have displayed the Ashford Dynamics logo. Instead, they showed a different crest, a black hawk holding a golden key, and underneath in elegant gold lettering, the Harrington Foundation for Technological Ethics. What the hell? Marcus whispered. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice rolled through the room. Please welcome the new chairwoman of the board for the entity formerly known as Ashford Dynamics, Miss Elena Harrington. The applause was thunderous. Elena walked onto the stage and Marcus forgot how to breathe. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that moved like liquid shadow. Around her neck sat a sapphire necklace that caught the light like captured starlight, the Star of Geneva, her grandmother's legacy worth more than the combined net worth of half the people in the room. She was radiant, powerful, untouchable. She approached the microphone, and her gaze swept the room until it landed on Marcus, standing alone by the shrimp cocktail station. Thank you all for being here tonight, she said. For years, this company operated on a philosophy of move fast and break things, including people. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. We were told the genius behind the code was a singular man, a visionary, a self-made success story. She paused. But the truth is, innovation requires more than ego. It requires integrity, stability, and capital that wasn't stolen. The room went quiet. Effective immediately, Ashford Dynamics is being rebranded as Aegis Systems. We're pivoting from consumer data mining to cybersecurity for charitable organizations. We're scrubbing the old code. She looked directly at Marcus. And we're scrubbing the old management. Marcus felt 500 pairs of eyes turned toward him. However, Elena continued, her voice softening. We do believe in giving credit where it's due. We have a special presentation tonight, to honor the past. A flicker of hope sparked in Marcus's chest. Was this it? A peace offering? Please turn your attention to the screens. The Harrington crest vanished. Security footage appeared. Grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. The kitchen of the penthouse. Timestamp 3 nights ago. Marcus's voice echoed through the ballroom. You lived off my hard work. Now the ride is over. If you fight this, I will bury you in legal fees until you're begging for change on the subway. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Victoria's voice. She's probably having a breakdown. What a psycho. Marcus again laughing. Who cares, she's gone, and she didn't cost me a dime. The video froze on Marcus's sneering face. The silence was absolute. Elena looked down at him from the stage. You were right, Marcus, she said softly into the microphone. I didn't cost you a dime. I cost you everything. She stepped back from the podium. The applause started slowly. A single clap from William Prescott in the front row. Then the investors joined. Then the press. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was giving Elena Harrington a standing ovation. Marcus backed away. His heel caught the leg of a serving cart. Crystal champagne glasses crashed to the floor, shattering the spell. A security guard appeared at his elbow. Sir, you're causing a disturbance. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I built this, Marcus stammered. She's lying. This is my company, my gala, my... This way, sir. The guard's hand closed around his arm like a vice. Marcus was dragged through the ballroom past the staring faces of everyone he'd ever tried to impress. Through the lobby. Out the front doors. He landed on the wet pavement outside the Plaza Hotel. It was raining again. Marcus sat on the cold concrete listening to the muffled applause from inside. He looked up at the digital billboard across the street. Breaking heiress reclaims tech empire. Fraud investigation opened into former CEO Marcus Ashford. He put his head in his hands. He'd wanted to be famous. He'd wanted the world to know his name. Now they finally did. The rain had stopped by the time Marcus pulled himself off the pavement outside the plaza. His tuxedo was ruined. His knees were scraped through the fabric. His phone had 17 missed calls from Arthur Pendergast and 43 notifications from news apps, all screaming variations of the same headline. Tech billionaire exposed as fraud. Mystery heiress destroys ex-husband in public takedown. Ashford Dynamics. Stock plummets 73% in after-hours trading. Marcus walked. He didn't know where he was going. He just walked, letting the cold Manhattan wind cut through his wet clothes until he couldn't feel anything anymore. His mind kept replaying the same moment. Elena on that stage. Elena in that blue dress. Elena looking down at him with eyes that held no anger, no satisfaction, just the quiet certainty of someone who had already won. She had planned this. All of it. Every moment of their 5-year marriage had been a setup for this single devastating finale. And he had never suspected a thing. His phone buzzed. Arthur again. Marcus answered. His voice sounded dead even to his own ears. What? Where are you? I've been trying to reach you for an hour. Walking. Walking where, Marcus, we need to talk. The SEC is opening a formal investigation. They're subpoenaing your financial records. Every record, personal and corporate. Marcus stopped at the middle of the sidewalk. A woman bumped into him. Kirst kept moving. On what grounds? Fraud. Misrepresentation of assets. Possible securities violations. Arthur's voice was tight-controlled, the voice of a lawyer who was already calculating how to distance himself from a sinking ship. The complaint was filed by Harrington Maritime's legal team. They're claiming you knowingly misled investors about the ownership structure of your company. I didn't mislead anyone. I didn't know Elena owned anything. That's going to be a hard sell, Marcus. You were married to her for 5 years. You lived in a penthouse she secretly owned. You built your company with money she secretly provided. The optics are catastrophic. Marcus started walking again. Faster now. What are my options? Honestly. Arthur paused. Cooperate fully. Plead ignorance. Hope the prosecutors believe you were a patsy rather than a co-conspirator. A patsy? Marcus laughed. It came out broken hysterical. I was the CEO. I was the visionary. I was on the cover of Forbes. You were on the cover of Forbes because Elena Harrington wanted you there. Arthur's voice hardened. Think about it, Marcus. Every break you ever got, every lucky investment, every door that mysteriously opened, she was behind all of it. You weren't building an empire. You were performing in a play she wrote. Marcus hung up. He looked around and realized he had walked all the way to Central Park. The trees were dark shapes against the city glow. Somewhere nearby, a homeless man was singing off-key. 3 days ago, Marcus Ashford had been one of the most celebrated entrepreneurs in New York. Now he was standing in the dark, alone with nothing but a ruined tuxedo and a phone full of bad news. And somewhere across the city, Elena Harrington was toasting her victory. Elena wasn't toasting. She was sitting in this penthouse suite of the Pierre Hotel, still wearing the blue velvet gown, staring out at the Manhattan skyline with a glass of untouched champagne in her hand. William Prescott sat across from her reviewing documents on his tablet. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the climate control. The SEC investigation is proceeding faster than expected, William said without looking up. The Harrington legal team filed the formal complaint 2 hours ago. Marcus's assets will be frozen by morning. Elena didn't respond. The board of Aegis Systems has unanimously approved your appointment as chairwoman. The rebranding will be complete within the week. Stock prices are already recovering based on the announcement of new leadership. Still nothing. William looked up. He studied Elena's profile, the rigid set of her shoulders, the untouched champagne, the way she was staring at the lights like she was looking for something she'd lost. "You won," he said quietly. "Completely, decisively, exactly as planned." "I know." "Then why do you look like someone who lost?" Elena turned from the window. Her eyes were dry, but there was something hollow in them that hadn't been there before. "Because I spent 5 years waiting for him to see me, William. 5 years hoping that somewhere beneath the arrogance and the cruelty, there was a man capable of genuine love." She set down the champagne glass. "And in the end, I proved myself right. He never loved me. He never even knew me. I was furniture to him, a prop, something to make him look better at parties." "That's not your fault." "No." Elena's voice was flat. "It's his. But it doesn't make the emptiness go away." She stood and walked to the window, pressing her palm against the cold glass. "I thought revenge would feel different. I thought destroying him would fill the hole he carved in me. But it doesn't. I watched him get dragged out of that ballroom and I felt nothing. Just tired." William set down his tablet. He'd known Elena since she was born. He'd watched her grow from a quiet, curious child into a brilliant, guarded woman. He'd warned Theodore Harrington that letting her go undercover as a nobody was dangerous, that she might get hurt. Theodore had said that pain was the only teacher worth listening to. William wasn't sure anymore. "What happens now?" he asked. Elena turned. The vulnerability in her eyes vanished, replaced by something harder. Something that had been forged in 5 years of silent suffering. "Now we finish what we started. The SEC investigation is just the beginning. I want Marcus Ashford to understand exactly what he threw away. I want him to feel every day what it's like to be powerless, dismissed, invisible." "That could take years." "I have years." Elena's smile was cold. "I have nothing but time." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. "What is it?" William asked. "A text. From Marcus." William stood. "What does it say?" Elena read the message aloud, her voice careful and controlled. "We need to talk. Please. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. Meet me at the diner where we first met. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. I'll wait all day if I have to. I just need to understand." She stared at the phone for a long moment. "He wants to understand," she said softly. "After everything, after the humiliation, the lies, the betrayal. He wants me to explain myself to him. You don't owe him anything." "No, I don't." But she didn't delete the message. William watched her carefully. "You're not actually considering going?" Elena didn't answer. She walked to the bedroom, the blue velvet gown trailing behind her like a shadow. "Good night, William." The door closed behind her. William Prescott stood alone in the suite, staring at the closed door with a feeling he rarely experienced. Uncertainty. He knew Elena better than almost anyone. He knew her strength, her patience, her capacity for cold, calculated vengeance. But he also knew that beneath all of that armor was a heart that had never stopped hoping. And hope, in his experience, was the most dangerous weapon of all. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in his cramped hotel room watching the clock tick toward dawn, trying to compose the perfect message. Something that would make Elena see him again. Something that would give him a chance to what he didn't know. He just knew that he couldn't let it end like this. Not with her on that stage looking down at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. Not with 500 people applauding his destruction. He needed her to understand. Understand what a voice in his head asked. That you're sorry you got caught. That you want your life back. That you still don't really see her as a person, just as a key to unlock the door you slammed in your own face. Marcus pushed the voice away. At 5 a.m., he took a taxi to Queens. The diner was exactly as he remembered it. A greasy spoon on the corner of a faded block, the kind of place that served coffee in chipped mugs and never charged more than $8 for breakfast. He'd met Elena here 6 years ago. She'd been his waitress. Quiet, unassuming, pretty in a forgettable way. He'd asked for her number because he was bored, and she seemed easy. He'd married her because she made him feel like a king. He'd divorced her because he wanted a shinier trophy. And now he was sitting in a cracked vinyl booth watching the door, waiting for the woman he'd thrown away to give him one more chance. The hours crawled by. 7 a.m. Nothing. 8 a.m. Nothing. 9 a.m. The breakfast rush came and went. The waitress, not Elena. Never. Elena again refilled his coffee 4 times without asking. 10 a.m. Marcus's phone buzzed with news alerts. SEC investigation widens. Ashford faces criminal charges. 11 a.m. The lunch crowd started filtering in. Marcus ordered a sandwich he couldn't taste. Noon. The door opened and his heart stopped. But it wasn't Elena. Just an old man with a newspaper. By 2 p.m. Marcus had accepted that she wasn't coming. Of course she wasn't coming. Why would she? She had won. Completely. Devastatingly. She had taken everything he had and exposed him to the world as the fraud he never knew he was. She didn't need to meet him. She didn't need closure. She didn't need anything from him at all. He was nothing to her now. Maybe he always had been. Marcus stood to leave. He dropped a 50 on the table, almost the last of his cash, and walked toward the door. "You waited longer than I expected." The voice came from behind him. Marcus spun around. Elena was sitting in the booth at the back of the diner, the one hidden from the entrance by the old jukebox. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like the woman he'd married, the woman he'd dismissed, the woman he'd never really seen. "How long have you been here?" Marcus asked. "Since 6:30. You were watching me. I wanted to see if you were sincere." She gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit down, Marcus. You wanted to understand. So let's talk." Marcus walked to the booth on legs that didn't feel steady. He slid into the seat across from her, close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. They'd been married for 5 years. He'd never noticed those gold flecks before. "Why?" he asked. His voice came out hoarse. "Why all of this? The fake identity, the marriage, the long game. Why not just live your life?" Elena considered the question. "Because I wanted to be loved," she said simply. "Not for my name, not for my money, not for what I could give someone. I wanted to know what it felt like to be loved for who I actually am." "And you thought marrying a stranger would give you that?" "I thought it would give me a fair test." Her eyes hardened. "I walked into this diner 6 years ago and you looked at me like I was invisible. Just another waitress. Another nobody. And then something shifted. You asked for my number. You took me to dinner. You told me I was beautiful." She leaned forward. "Do you remember what you said to me on our 3rd date, Marcus?" He didn't. "You said, 'I don't care about money or status. I just want someone real. Someone who sees me for who I am, not what I have.' You said you were tired of gold diggers and social climbers. You said you wanted authenticity." Her voice dropped. "I gave you authenticity. I gave you the most real version of myself I've ever been. And you know what you did with it. You got bored. You started looking for something shinier, something younger, something that would make other men jealous." "Elena? You told me I was plain," she continued, her voice rising. "You told me I was unambitious. You told me I didn't fit your brand. You threw me out into the rain and poured champagne to celebrate getting rid of me." She pulled back, composing herself. "So yes, Marcus. I destroyed your company. I took your money. I humiliated you in front of everyone you ever wanted to impress, and I don't feel guilty about any of it." Marcus sat in silence. Everything she said was true. Every word, every accusation. He had done all of those things, and he had done them without a moment of hesitation or remorse. "I'm sorry," he said finally. The words felt inadequate, pathetic, but they were all he had. Elena studied him. Her expression was unreadable. "Are you sorry for what you did, or are you sorry you got caught?" Marcus opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. The honest answer was both. He was sorry because his life was ruined, and he was sorry because somewhere in the wreckage, he was starting to realize that he'd genuinely hurt someone who had genuinely loved him. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know if I even know the difference anymore." Elena nodded slowly. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me." She stood reaching for her purse. "Wait," Marcus said. "That's it. After everything. What did you expect, Marcus? A reconciliation, a tearful reunion." She looked down at him with something that might have been pity. "I didn't come here to forgive you. I came here to see if there was anything left worth saving. And there isn't." She slung her purse over her shoulder. "You're not a monster, Marcus. You're just a man who never learned that people have value beyond what they can give you. Maybe someday you'll figure that out. Maybe you won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore." She walked toward the door. "Elena." She stopped hand on the frame. "For what it's worth," Marcus said quietly, "you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I just didn't know it until it was too late." Elena didn't turn around. "I know," she said, and then she walked out into the gray afternoon light, leaving Marcus Ashford alone in the diner where they'd first met, surrounded by the ghosts of everything he'd thrown away. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, the SEC had subpoenaed every financial document Marcus had ever signed. Within a month, criminal charges were filed. Fraud, misrepresentation, securities violations. The kind of charges that carried real prison time. Arthur Pendergast had dropped him as a client. Too toxic, too high profile, no upside. Marcus couldn't afford a new lawyer. He couldn't afford much of anything. The hedge fund that had bought his remaining stock options had demanded immediate repayment when the shares cratered. His personal accounts were frozen pending investigation. The IRS had opened a separate inquiry into 5 years of tax returns that now looked suspiciously complicated. Every door he tried was locked. Every favor he called in went unanswered. Every friend he'd made on the way up suddenly couldn't remember his name. Marcus found a public defender who agreed to represent him. A young woman fresh out of law school, eager and overwhelmed with a caseload of 30 other clients and no time for special treatment. Her name was Amy Chen. She was 26 years old, and she was his only hope. "The charges are serious," Amy said during their first meeting. She was sitting across from him in a cramped conference room at the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse. "The prosecution has a strong case. Your signatures are on everything." "I didn't know what I was signing," Marcus said. "Elena, she set me up. She gave me the money knowing I wouldn't ask questions." "That's actually worse." Amy flipped through the file. "You're the CEO of a publicly traded company. 'I didn't know' isn't a defense. It's an admission of gross negligence. The jury will crucify you." "So what do I do?" Amy looked at him with eyes that were too old for her young face. "You cooperate. Fully. You accept responsibility for your mistakes. You throw yourself on the mercy of the court and hope they see you as a fool rather than a criminal. And if they don't, then you're looking at 5 to 10 years federal prison." Marcus put his head in his hands. 5 years ago, he had been a nobody with a dream and a laptop. 4 years ago, he had been a rising star with a beautiful wife and a company that couldn't fail. 3 years ago, he had been on the cover of Forbes smiling like he owned the world. Now he was facing a decade behind bars, abandoned by everyone he'd ever known, destroyed by the woman he'd dismissed as worthless. The universe, it turned out, had a brutal sense of humor. There might be one option, Amy said slowly. Marcus looked up. Elena Harrington. She's the complainant in most of these charges. If she were to withdraw her cooperation, testify that she doesn't believe criminal intent was involved, the prosecution's case would collapse. She'll never do that. Probably not. Amy shrugged. But you asked for options. That's the only one I see. That night, Marcus sat in his empty hotel room and stared at his phone. Elena's number was still in his contacts. He'd called it 100 times in the past month. She'd never answered, but he had to try. One more time. He typed out a message, erased it, typed again. I know you have every reason to hate me. I know I deserve everything that's happening, but I'm begging for mercy, not forgiveness, just mercy. Please, help me understand what you need from me to make this stop. He hit send. He stared at the screen, waiting for the delivered notification to change to read. 5 minutes passed. 10, 20. Then finally 3 dots appeared. Elena was typing. Marcus held his breath. The message arrived. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. My attorney's office. We'll discuss terms. Marcus read the message 3 times to make sure he understood. Terms. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Terms. Whatever Elena Harrington wanted from him, it was going to cost more than money. But at this point, Marcus didn't have anything left to lose. Marcus arrived at the law offices of Prescott Sterling and Associates at 8:47 a.m. He'd barely slept. He'd spent the night trying to anticipate what Elena might want, what terms she might offer, what pound of flesh she intended to extract. The building itself seemed designed to intimidate. 53 floors of glass and steel in the heart of Midtown. The kind of place where fortunes were made and destroyed before lunch. The elevator alone probably cost more than his remaining net worth. A receptionist led him to a conference room on the 49th floor. The door was heavy oak. The handle was polished brass. Everything whispered money so old it had forgotten how to be loud. Wait here, the receptionist said. Ms. Harrington will be with you shortly. Marcus sat in one of the leather chairs. His hands were sweating. He wiped them on his pants, then immediately regretted it. The pants were the last decent pair he owned, and now they had palm stains on the thighs. The door opened. Elena walked in, followed by William Prescott and 2 associates carrying file boxes. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit today. Professional, severe. Her hair was pulled back and she wore no jewelry except for the signet ring on her pinky finger. The hawk and key. The Harrington crest. Marcus? She sat across from him. Not close, but not far. Just far enough to maintain control of the distance between them. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Everyone has choices. Yours are just more limited than they used to be. William settled into the chair beside her, opening a leather portfolio. The associates began unpacking the file boxes, spreading documents across the conference table like evidence at a trial. Let's not waste time, Elena said. You're facing federal criminal charges, fraud, securities violations, misrepresentation. If convicted, you're looking at 5 to 10 years in prison. My lawyer already told me. Your lawyer is a public defender with 30 other cases. She's doing her best, but her best isn't going to save you. Elena folded her hands on the table. I can. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not hope, he'd learned not to trust hope anymore. Something more dangerous. Desperation. What do you want? Elena glanced at William, who slid a thick document across the table. The cover page read, Settlement Agreement in bold letters. Read it, Elena said. Marcus picked up the document. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. His face went pale. This is insane. It's comprehensive. You want me to sign over everything, every asset, every future earning, every piece of intellectual property I might ever create. He looked up at her, disbelief bleeding through his voice. You want me to work for you, for the next 10 years, at a salary you determine, doing whatever job you assign. That's correct? I'd be your employee, your servant. You'd be alive and free. Elena's voice was calm, matter of fact. Which is more than you'd be if these charges go to trial. Marcus dropped the document on the table. Why, you already destroyed me. You took my company, my reputation, my money. What more could you possibly want? I want you to understand. The words hung in the air. Understand what? Elena leaned forward. Her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made him want to look away. For 5 years, I was your servant. I cooked your meals. I cleaned your home. I smiled at your jokes and laughed at your stories and pretended to be fascinated by your genius. I made myself small so you could feel big. I erased myself so you could shine. Her voice hardened. And you know what you gave me in return, contempt. Indifference. You treated me like I was furniture. Like I was something you owned rather than someone you loved. And when you got bored, you threw me away without a second thought. She sat back. So yes, Marcus, I want you to work for me. I want you to wake up every morning knowing that your entire life depends on my goodwill. I want you to experience exactly what it feels like to be powerless, dismissed, invisible. That's not justice, Marcus said. That's revenge. Maybe. Elena shrugged. But it's the only deal you're going to get. Sign the agreement and I withdraw my cooperation with the prosecution. The criminal case collapses. You walk away with nothing except your freedom and a job. And if I refuse, then I testify against you at trial. I provide every document, every email, every recorded conversation. I bury you under so much evidence that your public defender won't know where to start. Elena's smile was cold. And when they sentence you to federal prison, I'll make sure you know exactly who put you there. Marcus stared at the document. 10 years of servitude versus 10 years in prison. It wasn't really a choice. It was a capitulation. I need time to think. You have until noon. Elena stood. William will show you to a waiting room. Coffee and water are available. I suggest you use the time wisely. She walked toward the door. Elena. She paused, hand on the frame. Why are you really doing this? Marcus asked. It's not just revenge. There's something else. Something you're not telling me. Elena turned. For just a moment, something flickered behind her careful mask. Something that looked almost like pain. You're right, she said quietly. There is something else. But you haven't earned the right to know what it is yet. She walked out, leaving Marcus alone with William Prescott, and a decision that would define the rest of his life. The waiting room was small and comfortable, with a leather couch and a coffee machine that probably cost more than Marcus's hotel room. He sat in silence, staring at the settlement agreement, reading the same clauses over and over. 10 years. Salary determined by employer. Assignment of all intellectual property rights. Non-compete. Non-disclosure. Mandatory compliance with all reasonable directives. It was a prison sentence without bars. A leash so tight he wouldn't be able to breathe without Elena's permission. But the alternative was actual prison. Actual bars. Actual years of his life disappearing into a federal facility somewhere. At 11:15, the door opened. William Prescott walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Marcus and sat in the chair across from him. I thought you might want company, William said. The waiting is often the hardest part. Marcus took the coffee without tasting it. Did she send you to make sure I sign? She sent me to answer any questions you might have. William sipped his own coffee. I've known Elena since the day she was born, Marcus. I've watched her grow into one of the most remarkable women I've ever met. And I've also watched her suffer more than anyone should have to suffer. Because of me. Partially, but not entirely. William set down his cup. Did Elena ever tell you about her mother? Marcus frowned. She said her mother died when she was young. Cancer, I think. Leukemia. Elena was 12 years old. She sat by her mother's bedside for 3 months watching her fade away. She held her hand when she took her last breath. William's voice was quiet, measured the voice of someone recounting a tragedy he'd witnessed firsthand. After that, Elena changed. She became guarded, protective of her heart. She built walls so high that even her father couldn't reach her sometimes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand what you destroyed." William leaned forward. "When Elena met you, she made a choice. She chose to lower those walls. She chose to be vulnerable. She chose to believe that love was possible even for someone who had been hurt as deeply as she had." His eyes hardened. "And you took that vulnerability and you crushed it. You made her feel worthless. You made her feel invisible. You confirmed every fear she'd ever had about opening her heart to another person." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Not self-pity. Something worse. Guilt. "I didn't know," he said. The words sounded pathetic even to his own ears. "No, you didn't. And that's the tragedy." William stood. "You had the chance to be loved by an extraordinary woman, and you didn't even bother to learn who she really was." He walked toward the door. "You have 45 minutes, Marcus. I suggest you use them wisely." The door closed behind him. Marcus sat alone in the silence, the weight of everything he'd lost pressing down on him like a physical force. He thought about Elena at 12 years old, sitting by her mother's deathbed. He thought about Elena at 23, walking into that diner with walls around her heart and hope in her eyes. He thought about Elena at 28, standing in their kitchen, while he told her she didn't fit his brand anymore. He had taken someone who had already been broken, and he had broken her again. And he hadn't even noticed. At 11:58, Marcus Ashford signed the settlement agreement. He didn't do it because he had no choice. He did it because for the first time in his life, he was starting to understand that he deserved it. The months that followed were a masterclass in humiliation. Elena assigned Marcus to the mailroom of Aegis Systems. Not as a supervisor, not as a consultant, as a clerk. He sorted packages. He delivered envelopes. He pushed a cart through the same hallways where people used to stop and stare at him with admiration. Now they stared for different reasons. Everyone knew who he was. Everyone knew what had happened. The fall of Marcus Ashford was the most talked about scandal in the tech industry. His face had been on every business news program, every magazine cover, every viral tweet. And now he was delivering mail. The first week was unbearable. The whispers followed him everywhere. The sideways glances. The barely suppressed smirks. One junior analyst actually took a photo of him pushing his cart and posted it on social media. It got 50,000 likes in 2 hours. Marcus wanted to quit. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to walk out, to tell Elena to go to hell, to accept prison, if that's what it took to preserve what was left of his dignity. But he didn't. He stayed. He sorted. He delivered. And slowly, something began to change. At first, Marcus didn't recognize what was happening. He was too focused on his own suffering, too consumed by self-pity, too convinced that the universe had treated him unfairly. But as the weeks turned into months, he started to notice things. He noticed the cleaning staff who worked 12-hour shifts for minimum wage and never complained. He noticed the security guards who stood on their feet all day and still found time to smile at everyone who walked through the door. He noticed the junior employees who worked nights and weekends to prove themselves, hoping for a chance that might never come. He noticed all the people he had walked past for years without seeing. The invisible ones. The nobodies. The Elenas of the world. And for the first time in his life, Marcus began to understand what it meant to be one of them. 6 months into his tenure at Aegis Systems, Elena called Marcus to her office. He'd seen her in the hallways occasionally, always at a distance, always surrounded by executives and advisors. She never acknowledged him, never even looked in his direction. Now he was standing in her office, the same office that used to be his, feeling like a student called before the principal. "Sit down," Elena said. Marcus sat. The chair was comfortable, but he couldn't relax. His spine was rigid, his hands folded in his lap. "How are you finding the work?" Elena asked. It's humbling. That's the point. She studied him with eyes that gave nothing away. I've been getting reports about you. Your supervisors say you're reliable, punctual, respectful. You've stopped complaining about the work. There's nothing to complain about. I'm doing what I agreed to do. Most people in your position would have broken by now. They would have violated the terms of the agreement, done something to get themselves fired. Anything to escape the embarrassment. Would that have sent me to prison? Yes. Then I made the right choice. Marcus met her gaze. I'm not going to pretend I've transformed into a saint, Elena. I still hate this. I still resent it. But I understand why you're doing it, and I've decided to stop fighting. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Do you know why I put you in the mailroom? She finally asked. To humiliate me. No. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. I put you there because it's where I started. Not here, but somewhere similar. When I was 16, my father insisted that I spend a summer working in the shipping yards, loading cargo, cleaning decks, doing the jobs that no one else wanted to do. She turned to face him. He said that wealth without understanding is dangerous, that you can't lead people if you don't know what their lives are actually like. That privilege blinds us to the truth unless we actively fight against it. And did it work? It made me who I am. Elena crossed her arms. You built a company, Marcus. You stood on stages and called yourself a visionary. But you had no idea what it actually took to make that company run. You didn't know the names of your janitors. You didn't know that your receptionist was a single mother working 2 jobs. You didn't know anything about anyone except yourself. Marcus absorbed the words. They landed like blows, but he didn't flinch. You're right, he said. I didn't. And I'm ashamed of that. Shame is a start, but it's not enough. Elena returned to her desk and pulled out a folder. I'm reassigning you. Marcus felt his stomach clench. Where? Operations. Specifically the teams that handle logistics for our charitable clients. You'll be managing delivery schedules for food banks, medical supply chains, disaster relief coordination. That's actual work, meaningful work. It is, and it's harder than anything you've ever done. Elena slid the folder across the desk. You'll be working 16-hour days. You'll be solving problems that don't have clean solutions. You'll be responsible for making sure that aid reaches people who desperately need it. Marcus opened the folder. The documents inside detailed partnerships with relief organizations around the world, hurricane response, refugee assistance, pandemic supply chains. Why? He asked. Why give me this? Because I'm not trying to destroy you, Marcus. I never was. Elena's voice softened, almost imperceptibly. I'm trying to rebuild you. From the ground up. Into someone who actually deserves the chances he was given. Marcus looked at the folder in his hands. 6 months ago, he would have seen this as another form of punishment, another humiliation. Now he saw it for what it was, a chance. When do I start? He asked. Tomorrow, 5 a.m. Our first shipment leaves at dawn. Elena almost smiled. Don't be late. I won't be there to protect you. Marcus stood. He wanted to say something, thank you maybe, or I won't let you down, but the words felt inadequate. Instead, he just nodded and walked toward the door. Marcus? He stopped. This isn't forgiveness, Elena said. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you, but it is a recognition that people can change, that growth is possible. She paused. Don't make me regret believing that. Marcus turned to face her. For the first time since the courtroom, he looked her directly in the eyes. I won't. He walked out of her office and into a future he never expected. Behind him, Elena Harrington sat alone at her desk, staring at the closed door. She had spent 5 years planning her revenge. She had spent months executing it. She had taken everything from the man who had taken everything from her. And now she was giving him a chance to become something better. William Prescott would call her foolish. Her father would call her soft. But Elena knew something that neither of them understood. Revenge was easy. Destruction was simple. Any person with enough resources and enough anger could tear someone down. But redemption, real redemption, was the hardest thing in the world. And for reasons she couldn't fully explain, she wanted Marcus Ashford to find it. Not for his sake, for hers. Because as long as she hated him, he still had power over her. As long as she defined herself by what he had done to her, she was still trapped in the marriage she had escaped. But if he changed, if he truly changed, then maybe she could finally let go. Maybe she could finally be free. Elena closed the folder on her desk and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Marcus was walking back to his small apartment carrying the weight of a second chance he didn't deserve. Tomorrow, he would start the hardest work of his life, and Elena would be watching. Because this story wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. 2 years passed. Not quickly, not easily. Each day felt like climbing a mountain with no peak in sight. But Marcus Ashford climbed anyway, one painful step at a time. The operations work nearly broke him in the beginning. 16-hour shifts coordinating supply chains across 3 continents. Phone calls at 3 a.m. about delayed shipments. Crises that couldn't wait for morning. Problems that had no clean solutions. He made mistakes. Plenty of them. A miscalculated delivery schedule left a refugee camp without medical supplies for 36 hours. A communication breakdown caused 2 shipments to arrive at the wrong port. A budget error nearly bankrupted a partnership with a children's hospital in Guatemala. Each failure felt like confirmation of what he'd always secretly feared, that without Elena's money, without the illusion of success she'd built around him, he was exactly what she'd called him. Nothing. But he didn't quit. He couldn't. Not because of the settlement agreement. Not because of the threat of prison. Because somewhere along the way, the work had started to matter. The first time Marcus saw his efforts actually help someone, it changed something inside him. A hurricane had devastated a coastal town in Puerto Rico. His team coordinated emergency supplies, water, medicine, blankets. They worked around the clock for 72 hours straight. When the shipment arrived, Marcus watched via satellite feed as families received the supplies his team had fought to deliver. A mother held her crying infant, wrapping the child in a blanket that Marcus had argued for hours to include in the shipment. A grandfather wept as he received insulin that would keep him alive another month. A little girl no older than 6 clutched a stuffed animal that some anonymous donor had thrown into a supply crate at the last minute. Marcus sat alone in the operations center, watching these strangers receive what they needed to survive, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. Not the hollow purpose of building a company to feed his ego. Not the artificial purpose of chasing wealth and status. Real purpose. The kind that came from knowing your work mattered to someone other than yourself. He thought about Elena's words in her office. Wealth without understanding is dangerous. He was starting to understand. Elena watched Marcus's transformation from a careful distance. Monthly reports landed on her desk. Performance metrics. Team evaluations. Client feedback. She read every word, looking for signs that he was backsliding, that the change was superficial, that the man she'd married was still lurking beneath the surface. But the reports kept getting better. His direct supervisor, a veteran logistics coordinator named Patricia Chen, had initially protested the assignment. She'd seen the news coverage. She knew exactly who Marcus Ashford was and exactly what he'd done. "With respect, Ms. Harrington," Patricia had said during their first meeting, "I don't want a celebrity scandal in my department. My team works too hard for that kind of distraction." "Give him 3 months," Elena had replied. "If he doesn't measure up, I'll reassign him." 3 months passed, then 6, then a year. Patricia's reports evolved from grudging tolerance to cautious approval to genuine respect. "He's not the same person who walked in here," Patricia wrote in her 18-month evaluation. "I don't know what happened to him before he joined us, and I don't care. The man I work with now is dedicated, humble, and genuinely committed to our mission. I would recommend him for a leadership position. Elena read the report 3 times. Leadership position. The words felt impossible, like hearing that a hurricane had learned to plant flowers. But the evidence was undeniable. Marcus Ashford was changing. The question was whether the change was real. Elena decided there was only one way to find out. Marcus was reviewing cargo manifests when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dinner tonight, 7 p.m. The place where we first met. E. His hands trembled as he read the message. 2 years. 2 years since he'd seen Elena anywhere except across a crowded hallway or in the background of a video conference. 2 years since he'd had a conversation with her that lasted more than 30 seconds. He arrived at the diner at 6:45 p.m., heart pounding against his ribs. The place hadn't changed. Same cracked vinyl booths, same chipped coffee mugs, same smell of grease and hope that had drawn him in all those years ago. He chose a booth in the back, the same one where Elena had been hiding when he'd waited for her before, and ordered coffee he knew he wouldn't drink. At exactly 7 p.m., Elena walked in. She was wearing jeans and a simple white blouse. No designer labels, no diamonds, just the signet ring on her pinky finger catching the fluorescent light. She looked like the woman he'd married. She looked like the woman he'd lost. Elena slid into the seat across from him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You look tired," she finally said. "Operations will do that." Marcus managed a weak smile. "We're coordinating earthquake relief in Turkey right now. I've been sleeping about 4 hours a night." "I know. I've been reading Patricia's reports." Elena flagged down a waitress and ordered tea. "She says you've become indispensable." "She's being generous." "Patricia Chen has never been generous in her life. If she says you're indispensable, she means it." The waitress brought Elena's tea. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of everything that had happened and everything that remained unsaid. "Why am I here, Elena?" Marcus asked. "After 2 years, why now?" Elena wrapped her hands around the warm cup. She stared into the liquid as if searching for answers. "Because I need to know if it's real." "If what's real?" "The change, the person you've become." She looked up, her brown eyes searching his face. "Patricia's reports say one thing, but reports can be manipulated. Performance metrics can be gamed. I need to hear it from you, Marcus. I need to look you in the eye and ask." She leaned forward. "Are you different? Really different? Or is this just another performance, another mask you're wearing until you can figure out how to get your old life back?" Marcus felt the question land in his chest like a physical weight. 2 years ago, he would have lied. He would have said whatever she wanted to hear, performed whatever role would benefit him most. But he wasn't that man anymore. "I don't know," he said honestly. Elena blinked. "You don't know." "I don't know if I'm different enough. I don't know if the change is permanent. I wake up some mornings and I still feel like the person I used to be. Arrogant, self-centered, convinced that the universe owes me something." He took a breath. "But then I go to work. I see the people depending on me. I remember what happens when I fail, not to my reputation or my bank account, but to actual human beings who need help. And something shifts. The old voice gets quieter. The new one gets louder." He met her eyes. "I can't promise you I've transformed into a saint, Elena. I can only tell you that I'm trying, every single day, and that I understand now why that matters." Elena studied him for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable, but something had shifted behind her eyes. "Do you know why I set up the shell company?" she asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "It wasn't just a test. It wasn't just to see if you could love a poor woman." She set down her tea. "It was because I needed to believe that genuine connection was possible. That someone could see past the money and the name and the expectations and just see me." Her voice cracked almost imperceptibly. "My whole life, people have wanted something from me. My father's business partners wanted access. Society wanted the Harrington name attached to their causes. Men wanted the fortune I represented. Nobody ever just wanted Elena. I wanted Elena, Marcus said. At least I thought I did. No, you wanted the waitress. The simple girl who made you feel special. The blank canvas you could project your fantasies onto. Elena's voice hardened. You never wanted me. You never even tried to find out who I actually was. You're right. The admission came easier than Marcus expected. I didn't. And I'm sorry. Not sorry because it cost me everything. Sorry because you deserved better. You deserved someone who would fight to know you, not someone who was satisfied with the surface. Elena was quiet. The diner hummed around them. Customers came and went. The waitress refilled coffee cups. Life continued its ordinary rhythm, while two people sat in a back booth trying to find their way through the wreckage of what they'd been. The settlement agreement expires in 8 years, Elena finally said. I know. When it does, you'll be free. No more obligations, no more restrictions. You can walk away and never look back. I know. What will you do? Marcus considered the question. 8 years. A lifetime and a blink of an eye. I'll keep working, he said. Not because I have to, because I want to. The job matters. The people we help matter. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something that isn't about me, and I don't want to give that up. Elena's eyebrows rose slightly. And if I offered to release you early today, no conditions? Marcus felt his breath catch. Freedom. Real freedom. The thing he'd dreamed about for 2 years. But the dream didn't feel the same anymore. I'd say thank you, he said slowly. And then I'd ask if I could keep my position anyway. Elena stared at him. You're serious. Dead serious. Marcus leaned forward. You were right about everything, Elena. About wealth without understanding. About privilege blinding us. About people having value beyond what they can give us. I didn't learn those lessons because you forced me to. I learned them because they were true. He reached across the table not to touch her, just to close the distance between them. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I'm not asking for another chance with you. I burned that bridge, and I have to live with the ashes. But I am asking for something. What? Let me keep doing the work, not as punishment, not as penance, as purpose. Let me spend the rest of my career trying to make up for the person I used to be. Elena's hand trembled slightly around her teacup. You really have changed, she whispered. Haven't you? I'm trying to. That's not the same thing. No, Marcus agreed. But it's the best I can offer. The rest is up to time. Elena stood suddenly. Marcus's heart dropped. She was leaving. He'd said the wrong thing. He'd pushed too hard. But she didn't walk toward the door. She walked to his side of the booth and sat down next to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, jasmine and oud, the scent that had haunted his dreams for 2 years. I've spent a long time hating you, she said quietly. Longer than I should have, longer than was healthy. You had every right. Maybe. But hate is exhausting, Marcus. It takes so much energy to keep the fire burning. Energy I could have spent on other things, better things. She turned to face him. I don't love you anymore. I want to be clear about that. Whatever we had, whatever I thought we had, died in that penthouse kitchen when you threw me out. I can't resurrect it. I don't want to. Marcus nodded. The words hurt, but they were honest, and he'd learned to value honesty. But I also don't hate you anymore, Elena continued. Watching you these past 2 years, seeing the reports, hearing Patricia talk about the person you've become, something shifted. She took a breath. I'm releasing you from the agreement. Marcus's world tilted. What? Effective immediately. No conditions, no strings, you're free. You're... Elena, I'm not doing it for you. Her voice was firm. "I'm doing it for me. As long as that agreement existed, I was still your captor, still your judge, still tied to you by chains of my own making." She stood smoothing her blouse. "I want to be free too, Marcus. Free from the past. Free from the anger. Free from the woman who spent 5 years plotting revenge instead of living her life." She looked down at him, and for the first time since the courtroom, her eyes held something other than coldness. Respect. Tentative. Fragile. But real. "You earned this," she said. "Not through the work, although the work helped. Through the honesty. Through admitting you don't have all the answers. Through choosing growth over comfort." "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything." Elena pulled on her coat. "Just keep doing what you've been doing. Keep growing. Keep trying. That's all any of us can do." She walked toward the door, then paused. "Marcus." "Yes." "If you ever need a reference." A small smile played on her lips. "Tell them to call me." She walked out into the night. Marcus sat alone in the booth, staring at the door she'd disappeared through. Free. He was free. The word felt strange in his mind. Foreign. Like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. For 2 years, the settlement agreement had defined his existence. Every morning he'd woken knowing that his life belonged to someone else. Every night he'd gone to sleep knowing that freedom was a distant dream. And now, in a single conversation, it was over. He could walk away. Start fresh. Build something new. But as he sat there, surrounded by the smell of coffee and the hum of ordinary life, Marcus realized something unexpected. He didn't want to walk away. Not from the work. Not from the purpose he'd found. Not from the person he was becoming. Elena had given him a gift far greater than freedom. She'd given him the chance to choose who he wanted to be, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Ashford was going to make that choice deliberately. 3 years later, Marcus stood at a podium in Geneva, accepting an award he never expected to receive. The Humanitarian Excellence Award, given annually to individuals who demonstrated extraordinary commitment to global relief efforts. The ballroom was filled with dignitaries, philanthropists, and industry leaders. Cameras flashed from every angle. Journalists scribbled notes. It was exactly the kind of event Marcus used to live for. The attention, the admiration, the validation. But as he looked out at the crowd, he didn't feel triumphant. He felt grateful. 5 years ago, he began, I was a different person. I stood on stages like this one, accepting awards I didn't deserve, taking credit for work I hadn't done. I thought success was measured in dollars and headlines. I thought I was entitled to admiration simply because I existed. He paused. I was wrong. About everything. The crowd was silent. The person I am today exists because someone believed I could change. Even when I didn't believe it myself. Even when I'd given her every reason to give up on me. He looked toward the back of the room. Elena was there. She'd declined the invitation 3 times before finally agreeing to attend. She stood near the exit, arms crossed, watching with an expression he couldn't quite read. I don't deserve this award, Marcus said. The people who deserve it are the ones working in the field right now. The volunteers loading supply trucks at 3 a.m. The coordinators solving impossible problems with impossible deadlines. The donors who give without expecting recognition. He held up the crystal trophy. I accept this on their behalf, and I promise to spend whatever time I have left trying to live up to their example. The applause that followed wasn't the thunderous ovation of his tech CEO days. It was something quieter, more genuine. Marcus stepped away from the podium and made his way through the crowd toward the exit. Elena was waiting. That was quite a speech, she said. I meant every word. I know. That's what made it remarkable. They stood in the hallway away from the noise and the cameras. How are you? Marcus asked. It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of everything that had passed between them. Good. Busy. Aegis is expanding into renewable energy. It's consuming most of my attention. I read about it. Impressive work. It is. Elena smiled a real smile, not the careful professional one she usually wore. How's Patricia treating you? Like a drill sergeant. She promoted me to regional director last month and immediately doubled my workload. That sounds like Patricia. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. I never thanked you properly, Marcus said. For what you did. Destroying your life. Saving it. He met her eyes. The person I was needed to be destroyed. The settlement, the mailroom, the operations work, you gave me a chance to build something real from the wreckage. Most people wouldn't have bothered. Most people aren't stupid enough to marry someone for 5 years without knowing who they are. Elena's voice was dry, but her eyes were warm. We both made mistakes, Marcus. Yours were more obvious. Mine were more calculated. In the end, we both paid the price. And now we move forward. She extended her hand. Professionally speaking, I'd be interested in collaborating with your relief organization. Aegis has resources. Your team has expertise. Together we could do significant good. Marcus looked at her hand. 5 years ago, he'd taken a waitress's phone number, never imagining where it would lead. Now he was standing in Geneva, shaking hands with a billionaire heiress who had once destroyed everything he had, being offered a partnership built on mutual respect rather than deception. He took her hand. I'd like that. Elena nodded. Good. I'll have William send the proposal. She turned to leave, then stopped. Marcus? Yes. You asked me once why I really did all of this. The shell company, the long game, the revenge. She turned to face him. I told you that you hadn't earned the right to know yet. I remember. You've earned it now. She took a breath. I did it because I needed to prove something to myself. Not that you were terrible, I already knew that. I needed to prove that I was strong enough to survive you. Strong enough to take back what you stole. Strong enough to rebuild myself after you tried to erase me. Her voice dropped. And I needed to prove that even someone as lost as you could find their way back. Because if you could change, then maybe the world wasn't as hopeless as I thought. Maybe people really could grow. She smiled. Thank you for proving me right. She walked away, disappearing into the crowd of Geneva's elite. Marcus watched her go. He thought about the man who had thrown a waitress into the rain, laughing as he poured champagne. He thought about the man who had crawled out of that courtroom broken and humiliated. He thought about the man who had pushed a mail cart through the halls of his former company, learning humility one delivery at a time. He thought about the man standing here, now holding an award he'd never sought respected by people he'd never tried to impress. The same person, and completely different. That was the miracle, he realized. Not the transformation itself, but the discovery that transformation was possible. That no one was so far gone they couldn't find their way back. That every person, no matter how broken, carried within them the potential for redemption. Marcus Ashford had learned the hardest lesson of his life in that diner in Queens, surrounded by ghosts of his own making. Never underestimate the woman serving your coffee. She might own the building. She might own the company. She might own the very foundation your arrogance was built on. But more importantly, more dangerously, she might be the only person who could have saved you from yourself. And if you're lucky enough to get a second chance, don't waste it. Because some doors once closed never open again, and some lessons once learned change everything. Marcus Ashford walked out of the Geneva ballroom into the cool night air, carrying an award in one hand and the weight of 5 years of growth on his shoulders. He didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in his life, he was ready to face it honestly. And that, more than any trophy or title or fortune, was the real victory. The woman who rebuilt an empire from the ashes of a broken heart. The man who rebuilt himself from the wreckage of his own cruelty. Two people who had destroyed each other, then chose against all odds to let each other heal. This is the story of Elena Harrington and Marcus Ashford. Not a love story. Something harder. Something rarer. A story of redemption. And it ends the way all true stories end. Not with a wedding or a kiss or a happy ever after. With a choice. The choice to grow. The choice to change. The choice to become someone worthy of the chances you've been given. Marcus made his choice. Elena made hers. And in a world that too often celebrates revenge, their story reminds us of something we desperately need to remember. The strongest thing you can do isn't destroy your enemies. It's set them free to become better. That's not weakness. That's power. Real power. The kind that doesn't need to shout. The kind that just needs to sign the checks. And Elena Harrington. She signed them all.